The sharp knock on my front door came just after midnight, loud enough to pull me from a deep sleep. I had never expected that opening my door would change the direction of two lives forever. Standing beneath the porch light was a young woman with trembling hands, tear-filled eyes, and a small travel bag resting at her feet. She looked exhausted, frightened, and completely out of hope. Before I could even ask why she was there, she looked straight at me and whispered the words that would stay with me forever. My father gave me one night to find a husband. At that moment, I had no idea that the desperate stranger standing on my doorstep would teach me more about courage, family, forgiveness, and love than anyone I had ever known. Before we continue this unforgettable journey, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who believes in kindness and second chances, and subscribe to the channel Wisdom Storyverse for more emotional stories that touch the heart. Your support helps these stories reach people who may need hope today. My name is Mercer. I was 34 years old, worked as a landscape designer, and lived alone in a quiet neighborhood where nothing exciting ever happened. My days were predictable. I woke up early, worked until sunset, cooked simple dinners, read books, and slept. Years earlier, I had lost both my parents within 18 months of each other. Since then, I had slowly built walls around my heart. I wasn't bitter, but I had convinced myself that a peaceful, lonely life was safer than risking another heartbreak. That ordinary life ended the moment I met the young woman standing outside my door. Her name was Mia Sloan. She looked no older than 26. Her clothes were elegant but wrinkled from hours of walking. Tiny drops of rain rested on her hair, and despite trying to remain composed, she was shaking. She explained that she wasn't looking for money or a place to hide. She simply needed someone willing to hear her story before sunrise because her entire future depended on it. Earlier that day, her wealthy father had announced that she would marry the son of one of his business partners within a week. It wasn't a proposal born out of love, but a business agreement designed to strengthen two powerful companies. Mia had spent years working alongside her father, hoping he would one day respect her dreams. But instead, he saw her as another piece on a chessboard. When she refused the arrangement, he gave her an impossible challenge. If she truly believed she deserved to choose her own husband, then she had until sunrise to find one. If she returned alone, she would lose her inheritance, her career in the family company, and every connection to the life she had known. She had laughed at first, believing it was an empty threat. But by evening, her bank cards had stopped working. Her phone service had been canceled. Even the apartment she lived in belonged to her father's company, and security politely informed her she could not return. One by one, every door closed. Friends who had once filled her weekends suddenly refused to answer her calls. Some, her father. Others simply valued comfort more than loyalty. Alone with nothing but a small bag, she wandered through the city, wondering whether freedom was worth losing everything. Hours earlier, she had helped an elderly woman whose grocery bags had fallen across the sidewalk. That grateful woman happened to be my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Eleanor Finch. During their brief conversation, Mrs. Finch mentioned that I was one of the few people she trusted completely. She told Maria that if anyone would listen without judging, it would be the quiet man living across the street. That simple act of kindness led her to my doorstep. As I listened, I realized she wasn't asking me to marry her out of romance. She simply needed someone willing to stand beside her long enough to prove that her father could not control every decision she made. It sounded unbelievable, almost absurd. Yet nothing about her tears felt dishonest. I invited her inside, made fresh coffee, and gave her a warm blanket while dawn slowly crept closer. We spent talking. For the first time in years, I found myself opening up about my own life. I admitted how grief had convinced me to avoid relationships. She confessed that wealth had surrounded her, but genuine affection had always been scarce. We discovered that loneliness wears different faces. Mine lived inside a quiet house. Hers hid behind expensive walls. As the night faded, an unexpected idea formed. I suggested that instead of pretending to love each other, we could simply tell her father the truth. She had found someone willing to respect her choices, even if we were strangers. Marriage should never be forced. If he rejected that truth, at least she would know she had defended her freedom honestly. The sunrise painted the sky golden, as we drove together to the Sloane estate. The mansion stood like a fortress surrounded by polished gates and perfectly trimmed gardens. Inside waited her father, Victor Sloane, a man whose cold expression suggested he had already decided the outcome before we arrived. He looked at me. Instead, he stared at his daughter with disappointment, convinced she had failed. When she calmly introduced me and explained that I had offered to stand beside her because every person deserved the right to choose their future, something unexpected happened. Instead of shouting, he laughed. He believed I wanted her fortune. He offered me a large check to walk away immediately. I pushed the check back across the table without touching it. I explained that I owned a modest home, loved my simple work, and had no interest in his money. I only believed no father should treat his daughter like a business contract. The room fell silent. Victor challenged me with questions about responsibility, loyalty, sacrifice, and commitment. Hours passed as he searched for signs that I was lying. Every answer came from my heart rather than clever words. I admitted I didn't know whether Mia and I would ever become husband and wife, but I knew she deserved respect before she deserved marriage. For the first time, I noticed uncertainty appear in the older man's eyes. Then came a surprise. Maria's grandmother slowly entered the room using a wooden cane. She had overheard everything. With quiet strength, she reminded Victor that decades earlier, he had married the woman he loved, despite his own father's objections. She asked him why he now wanted to deny his daughter the same freedom he had once demanded for himself. Those words struck deeper than any argument I could have made. Victor left the room without speaking. Nearly 30 minutes passed before he returned, carrying a faded photograph of his late wife. Tears filled his eyes as he admitted that after losing her, he had buried himself in business because success felt easier than grief. Somewhere along the way, he had forgotten that people mattered more than profits. He apologized, not perfectly, not dramatically, but sincerely. He canceled the arranged marriage immediately. He restored Maria's access to her home, her work, and her future without conditions. Then he turned toward me and quietly thanked me for reminding him of the man he used to be. Life didn't suddenly become a fairy tale. After that day, Maria chose to move into a small apartment instead of returning to the mansion immediately. She wanted to build a life that belonged to her rather than one purchased for her. We stayed in touch, meeting for coffee, volunteering at local community gardens, and helping families rebuild neglected parks. Friendship grew naturally because neither of us rushed toward romance. Months became a year. One sunny afternoon, while planting oak trees at a neighborhood park, she smiled the same gentle smile I had first seen beneath my porch light. This time, there were no tears, no fear, and no impossible deadline. There was peace. She reached for my hand, and in that simple moment, we both understood that love had quietly arrived when neither of us had been searching for it. Our wedding took place on a bright spring morning beneath rows of blooming trees instead of inside a grand ballroom. Children laughed, neighbors celebrated, and even Victor stood proudly beside his daughter. He never tried to erase his mistakes. Instead, he spent the following years rebuilding trust through patience, humility, and genuine change. That became the greatest gift he could offer. Looking back, it still amazes me that everything began with one unexpected knock at midnight. I often wonder what would have happened if fear had convinced me not to answer the door. Perhaps two lonely people would have continued living separate lives, each believing hope had already passed them by. Instead, kindness opened a door that changed everything. If this story has touched your heart so far, please like this video, share it with your family and friends. Leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Wisdom Storyverse. Your support encourages us to continue sharing stories that remind the world that compassion still exists. Before we reach the ending, please comment, "Kindness opens doors." We'd love to know how many people still believe that one act of compassion can completely change someone's life. The greatest miracles rarely arrive with bright lights or perfect timing. Sometimes they arrive tired, frightened, and carrying nothing more than hope. Sometimes they knock quietly on an ordinary door in the middle of the night, waiting for someone brave enough to answer. That single decision can rewrite generations of pain into a future filled with healing. Never underestimate the power of listening, offering kindness without expecting anything in return, or believing in someone when the rest of the world has already walked away. Because every life-changing story begins with one simple choice. And sometimes that choice is opening the door when everyone else keeps it closed.